We are in uncharted territory, my friends. Historically, in the United States, it's pretty easy to predict the midterms. And most of the reason why that is because Americans just generally distrust the government. They don't really like the status quo. And that's a good thing, by the way. And so they tend to swing the opposite direction of where the president went 2 years previous. But here's the thing. The times we're living in are very, very different. When people say that we have never had a president like Donald Trump, they ain't lying. They ain't lying at all. In fact, we haven't ever had, in my opinion, a politician like Donald Trump in any facet, whether they've won an election or not in the United States, and maybe never in even world history. And so the conventional wisdom of election predictors is kind of out the window at this point. And I think 2016, 2020, and 2024 are good examples of that because, again, the pollsters were pretty much never correct. And the reason why is because Trump is such a unique candidate that pollsters could never really get a sample, like an accurate sample of his base of any of the three elections that he was a part of. 3 elections is big enough, I think, to show that, yeah, pollsters just couldn't do it. Like maybe if it was one election, like in 2016, the polls were way off. We thought to ourselves, well, Trump is so unique. That's interesting. But they didn't get it right in 2020 or 2024 either. And I've talked at length before about this. It's not because the pollsters were somehow corrupt. They have the incentive to be correct. It's because they just could not get an accurate sample size because Donald Trump is unlike anyone we've ever had. So looking forward to 2026, which is the next election, we aren't completely in the dark. And the reason why we're not completely in the dark, even though I don't think it's going to be like anything before, we're not completely in the dark. And the reason why is because we already had a midterm after a Trump presidency win. Of course, that was in 2018. So I want to show you what happened in 2018 and why it will not be like 2026. So we have to take it back to 2016 just to remind you of how Trump won. I'll put it up on the screen right now. Trump won with 304 electoral votes, almost the exact same as what he did this year. The only difference, really significant, was that Hillary Clinton won Nevada. This time, Trump won Nevada. So Trump won a little bit more. In terms of the popular vote, Trump won by like 3% more, so way more. Republicans held 52 in the House and the Senate. They won. And here's the big part. I don't think a lot of people remember this. In the House, Republicans won 241 to 194. So pretty crazy majority if you think about it. Right, for example, today, just for some perspective. So again, 2016, it was 241 to 194. Today, it's 218 to 215. So it's as razor thin as it can be pretty much in the House. Now, if you look at 2018, these were the results. In 2018, Republicans held the Senate. And you would think with such a massive majority in 2016 that we just talked about, they would have kept the House, but instead Democrats took 41 seats from Republicans, which is massive. And that sounds really bad. And you could look at that and kind of think, oh, that's going to happen in 2026 again. And again, if you look at American history, that's pretty par for the course. Like it's very realistic that could happen again. But there's 2 massive differences between 2016 and what led to 2018 and 2024 and what's going to lead to 2026. And I want to talk about them. So the first, this one's kind of boring, I'll admit, but it's significant nonetheless, is that the House saw more retirements in 2018 than any other time, but than any other election since 1992. And the numbers are really staggering. So that year, we had 20 Democrats retire and 44 Republicans retire. And the reason why that's significant is because when you are an incumbent running again, you have an edge on the person running against you. And obviously there were 44 Republicans that would have been an incumbent and were not because of the fact that they were retiring. So people were retiring, there was no incumbent, and then people switched to Democrats. So the moral of the story there is don't retire all of your Republicans at the same time. Like the Republican Party has to get together. Half of them get to retire, the other half don't get to retire. You have to wait 2 more years, right? That's the kind of boring side of it. But here's a really interesting side, and I think the biggest difference between 2016 and today. It is simply that in 2016, I believe most people were voting against Hillary Clinton. They saw the corruption, they saw Benghazi, they saw all the crazy stuff, the emails, everything that Hillary Clinton had to offer, the continuation of Barack Obama, which people were not a fan of. And they voted against her. And they didn't, and the reason why I say they voted against her and they didn't vote for Trump is because we didn't really know what Trump was going to be. Trump was not that specific in his policy. Obviously, he talked about America first. Obviously, he talked about the economy doing great, which sounds really great, but we hadn't actually seen it in action. Whereas we had seen Hillary Clinton in action as Secretary of State, and we hated it, and it sucked. And again, is a continuation of Barack Obama, so we knew that she was just going to be a Barack Obama. No one wanted it. They were voting against her. So in 2018, again, they weren't for Trump per se, they just were against Hillary Clinton. So when there were other Democrats that didn't seem like Hillary Clinton, even though they probably were, they voted for him in the House, I'm saying, obviously not as president. However, this time is very different. And the reason why is because people this time voted for Trump. There were plenty who voted against Kamala Harris. That's true. But I think more than that, people are voting for Trump. They wanted immigration fixed. They wanted the economy fixed. They wanted to stay out of World War III. And so my prediction is that Republicans might just keep all three chambers of government once again. And that kind of support would be fascinating and kind of history breaking if, again, you look at the swing of power from presidential elections to midterm elections. But I think it's very real because we know what Trump did before. And essentially all the things he did are things that Biden reversed and people hated. And so people want Donald Trump. And so they'll vote for Republicans if they think that those Republicans will carry out the agenda of Trump in the House. And so as I've talked about over and over and over again on this show over the last month, the other problem for Democrats is that they're in total denial about the election outcome. Their answer to this loss pretty much has been to go further to the left and demonize Americans. That is not a winning strategy for Democrats, and I think it's going to make things even worse for them come 2026. Well, guys, I don't know if you've heard, but I did write a book. It's called A New Cult. It's up on the bookshelf right there. You can purchase it on Amazon right now. The link is in the description below. It's only $9.99 right now. I'm doing a special Christmas deal. Go check it out. I had a really good time writing it. Found some fascinating stories. I think you'll enjoy it as well. Again, the link is in the description below. Go enjoy it. Gift it to your friends and family for Christmas. So, we all know that Kamala Harris and her campaign had no idea what they were doing the whole time. That's why they lost. And this very long-time Democrat donor said something about Trump's campaign that I don't think I had ever considered. Here it is.
She thought that all these votes were for her. They were not. The votes that she got were people voting against Trump. And the votes that Trump got were the people voting for Trump. What the Harris campaign should have done, instead of avoiding Joe Rogan and podcasts, it turns out that Barron Trump, who looks like a runway model, was telling his father, you need to go on podcasts. You need to go on Joe Rogan. You know, he was 3 hours late to a rally because he was doing Joe Rogan because that was so important. So Barron Trump is a lot smarter than everybody in the Harris. They said they didn't go on Joe Rogan, the progressives around her. You heard what Carmel said. The progressives didn't want to go on Joe Rogan. Look, if I'm running, I'm going on Joe Rogan.
Barron Trump was smarter than Kamala Harris's whole campaign. People, by the way, who make millions of dollars a year and who are supposed political experts. And you know why Barron was so much smarter than all of them? It's kind of dumb. It's because he's just a normal dude. And these political experts are elitist, crazy people who actually have to go out and they spend their whole time just guessing what normal people want instead of just thinking to themselves, what do I want? Because they can't think that way because they're crazy. They're actually crazy. These people are insane. If you've ever met these, I'm not talking about a normal Democrat. I'm talking about elitists that would work in Joe Biden or Kamala Harris's campaigns. And for Barron Trump, he's just an 18-year-old dude. Sure, he's been involved in politics. But if you're 18 or I'm 23 and you look at what do you want to see out of politicians? Do I want to drive 2 hours to go to a political rally and hear Donald Trump speak? Maybe. Do I want to go on YouTube and watch him just chat it up with Joe Rogan for 3 hours? Yeah, I do. That's way better. I'm sorry. That's just how our generation works. I don't know if you disagree, that's fine. I'm not saying Donald Trump can't go out and do traditional rallies, but going on the podcast reaches way more people and it reaches the people that are never going to go to the rallies. And that was Barron Trump's, I guess you could call it genius. I would just call it common sense. Unfortunately, that's not what Democrat elites have. So there's that. And there's many people have commented this on these videos that I've done and other videos. they've said this, the Joe Rogan podcast, the problem was, well, this was a total lose-lose for Kamala Harris, because if she didn't go on Joe Rogan, she was missing out on tons of eyeballs. I mean, literally 50 million viewers between Joe Rogan and Donald Trump's podcast. But if she did do it, on the other side, millions of people would see how phony she was. And so the real mistake was not actually going on not going on Joe Rogan's podcast, because really she shouldn't have, because she would have looked awful. The real mistake was on the Democrats, and that was not holding a Democrat primary, because the moment that they chose to have a elite chosen nominee instead of a people chosen nominee, they lost the election. It was that simple. But they could have gone through the primary. They could have found a fairly normal person. I don't know if there's any person running as a Democrat who's going to be normal, but they could have appeared normal. They could have taken anyone who was likable, and they could have had them go on those podcasts, and it would have gone well. But they couldn't do that, because instead they had Kamala Harris. Thank you so much for watching, guys. If you haven't already, go down below, like the video, subscribe to my channel, and watch another video.